I was 68 years old when I learned that silence can be louder than shouting. It began with a message that wasn't meant for me. A message that assumed I was far away, unaware, irrelevant. A message that treated my life, my home, and my existence as something already moved aside. My daughter-in-law wrote it casually. No anger. No fear. Just certainty. She won't be back for weeks. We can start moving my parents' things in. That was the sentence. That was how I found out my house was no longer considered mine. I want you to understand who I was before that moment. Not weak. Not confused. Not helpless. Just trusting. I had raised my son alone after his father passed. I worked 2 jobs, saved carefully, never asked for help. The house I lived in wasn't inherited. It wasn't gifted. I bought it myself, brick by brick, payment by payment, across 32 years of discipline. Every scratch on the doorframe marked his height as he grew. Every corner held memories that belonged only to me. When my son married, I welcomed his wife openly. I meant it. I gave them space. I gave them keys. I gave them trust. That was my first mistake. Before the storm, life was quiet, predictable, comfortable. I woke early, watered my plants, drank my tea near the window. I kept my routines because routines meant control, independence. My son visited on weekends. His wife smiled politely, never rude, never warm. The kind of smile that ends at the lips. Still, I told myself not to judge. She's young, I thought. She's adjusting. She means well. I even let them stay for months when they said they needed to save money. They never paid rent. They never asked how long was too long. And I never pushed. Because I didn't want to be that mother. The difficult one. The lonely one. The disposable one. The trip away wasn't a vacation. It was medical. A specialist 2 cities away. Tests that couldn't be done locally. Appointments stacked back to back. I told my son. I told his wife. I'll be gone 3 weeks, I said. Please keep an eye on the house. She nodded. Smiled. Took the spare key from my hand. I didn't know that was the moment she decided I was already gone. The message came 3 days into my stay. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I was tired. My phone buzzed late at night. A group chat notification appeared on the lock screen. My daughter-in-law's name was there. So was mine. And so was a preview of words that froze my breath. She won't be back for weeks. We can start moving my parents' things in. I stared at the screen, my heart slowing instead of racing. That's what fear does sometimes. It doesn't scream. It goes quiet. I opened the message. Scrolled. Read everything. Plans. Timelines. Room assignments. My bedroom mentioned as the bigger room. My office referred to as Dad's parents' space. My belongings described as we'll sort later. They weren't asking permission. They were reorganizing my life. What hurt wasn't just the audacity. It was the assumption. They spoke of me as if I was temporary. As if my absence equaled surrender. As if my return wasn't even worth considering. And my son? He didn't object. He added one line. Mom won't make a fuss. She hates confrontation. That line hurt more than all the rest combined. Because it meant he knew me. And he used that knowledge against me. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I didn't respond. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and folded my hands like I was preparing for prayer. But I wasn't praying. I was thinking. Slowly. Carefully. If I reacted emotionally, I would lose. If I confronted them directly, they would deny, minimize, blame, misunderstanding. They would paint me as paranoid. As dramatic. As an old woman confused by technology. I had seen this play out in other families. I refused to become that story. So I stayed silent. And I watched. Over the next few days, more messages came. Photos of furniture being measured. Comments about repainting. Jokes about finally making this place livable. Each message tightened something in my chest, but also sharpened something in my mind. They were careless. They assumed privacy. They documented everything. And they had no idea that every word they typed was building something far stronger than their plan. Evidence. When I returned home earlier than expected, I didn't announce it. I unlocked my door quietly, stepped inside, and stood very still. Boxes lined the hallway. My photographs were stacked face down against the wall. The smell of unfamiliar cooking filled the air. Voices echoed from the living room. Her parents. Already there. Already settled. Already acting like owners. No one noticed me at first. I listened. Not to argue. Not to accuse. To understand how deeply the betrayal ran. And in that silence, I realized something important. They didn't think I would fight back. They thought I would shrink. They thought kindness meant weakness. They were wrong. Very wrong. And that was the moment, standing in my own house, unseen, that I decided I wouldn't raise my voice. I would raise the truth. Slowly. Legally. Irreversibly. And this time, I would set the rules. I didn't reveal myself that day. I stayed hidden in my own house like a ghost that refused to haunt too soon. From the hallway, I listened as strangers spoke over the echoes of my life. Cups clinked against saucers I had chosen years ago. Someone laughed from my living room, sitting where my husband once sat, feet probably resting on the table I polished every Sunday. My daughter-in-law's voice floated above the rest. Confident. Directive. Comfortable. That was what unsettled me most. Not fear. Comfort. She was already home. I slipped back out quietly, my suitcase still in the trunk of the car. I drove to a small motel nearby and sat on the edge of the bed, the same way I had days earlier. Only this time, my hands were steady. Because confusion was gone. Now there was clarity. That night, I replayed everything. Every kindness I had offered. Every boundary I had softened. Every time I had stayed silent to keep peace. Peace, I realized, had been expensive. And I had been the only one paying for it. I opened my laptop and created a folder. I named it with my address. Simple. Neutral. Professional. Inside it, I began saving screenshots. Messages. Photos. Dates. I didn't cherry-pick. I saved everything. Because truth doesn't need exaggeration. It only needs time. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not emotional. Not frantic. Prepared. I explained slowly. I own my home outright, I said. My son and his wife have keys. They allowed others to move in without permission while I was away. There was a pause on the line. Then a question that changed everything. Do you have documentation? Yes, I answered. And for the first time since the betrayal, I smiled. The lawyer explained my options carefully. Trespassing. Unauthorized occupancy. Breach of trust. You don't need to confront them yet, she said. In fact, it's better if you don't. That aligned perfectly with what my instincts were already telling me. Silence had power. And I intended to use it. I didn't return home for 3 more days. Instead, I observed. A neighbor called, concerned. They've changed the locks, she said quietly. I thanked her. And added that detail to the folder. Changing the locks on a house you don't own is a bold move. It's also a documented one. When I finally walked back into my home, I did it openly. Calmly. I knocked. My daughter-in-law opened the door and froze. Her face didn't show guilt. It showed calculation. Oh, she said. You're back early. No apology. No explanation. Just inconvenience. Her parents stood behind her, awkward but not embarrassed. My son wasn't home. That too was intentional. I'll be staying elsewhere for a few days, I said softly. I need some quiet. She nodded, relief flickering across her eyes. That was mistake number 2. Because she thought my retreat meant surrender. It didn't. It meant strategy. Over the next week, I let them continue. I let them move furniture, repaint walls, receive mail. Every action added weight to the case. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed notices. Formal, precise, no drama, just law. My son finally called. "Mum, why are lawyers contacting us?" he asked. His voice was confused, not angry, which told me everything. He hadn't expected consequences. "I'm protecting my home," I replied. A pause. Then irritation. "You didn't have to make this so serious." That sentence confirmed what the messages already had. They didn't see me as an owner. They saw me as an obstacle. The investigation phase was slow, deliberate. My lawyer requested financial records, utility bills, insurance documents, everything that proved continuous ownership and residency. We compiled a timeline, departure date, message timestamps, move-in evidence. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. When the official notice arrived at my house, addressed to occupants, panic finally surfaced. Her parents wanted reassurance. My daughter-in-law wanted control. She called me for the first time. Not to apologize. To negotiate. "We're family," she said. "There's no need to embarrass everyone." Embarrassment. That word again. Not wrongdoing. Not theft. Embarrassment. I kept my voice calm. "Family doesn't plan to erase someone in their absence," I replied. Then I ended the call. That night, I sat alone in the motel room and felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not sadness. Strength. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. And the trap was already closing. Quietly, legally, and entirely by their own actions. They still thought this was a misunderstanding. They still believed I would back down. They were about to learn the difference between kindness and permission. By the time they realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was already too late. The shift happened quietly. No raised voices. No slammed doors. No dramatic confrontations. Just envelopes. Official ones. Stamped. Timed. Unignorable. They arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a man who did not care about family dynamics or emotional history. He cared about procedure. About signatures. About the law. The kind of man who doesn't negotiate. My daughter-in-law called me again that afternoon. This time her voice was different. Careful. Measured. "I think there's been some confusion," she said. "We never meant to upset you." I listened without interrupting. Because when people start choosing their words carefully, it means fear has finally entered the room. "You let your parents move into my house without my consent," I replied calmly. "You changed the locks. You reassigned rooms. You discussed my belongings as if I were already gone." Silence. Then, "We thought you'd be okay with it eventually." Eventually. As if ownership fades with age. As if patience equals permission. The lawyer advised me to let her talk. So I did. She spoke about cultural expectations. About family unity. About how difficult her parents' situation was. She did not speak about my rights. Or my dignity. Or my consent. That omission mattered. What they didn't know was that while they were adjusting curtains and repainting walls, I had been reconstructing timelines. Every message had metadata. Every photo had location data. Every utility usage spike aligned perfectly with their move-in dates. Even their mail had become evidence. Because once someone establishes residency, even unlawfully, It leaves a trail. And trails can be followed. My lawyer filed a formal complaint. Unauthorized occupancy. Illegal lock change. Misrepresentation of residence. The wording was cold. Neutral. Devastating. It didn't accuse. It established. Facts don't shout. They settle in. My son finally came to see me. He sat across from me in a quiet cafe, shoulders tense, eyes tired. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. I nodded. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't think. He tried to explain. He always did. He talked about pressure. About wanting to help his wife. About assuming I'd adapt. Assuming. Another word that cuts when spoken aloud. I raised you to stand on your own, I said. Not to stand on me. He looked down. For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. The mediation session was scheduled the following week. Neutral location. Recorded minutes. Legal counsel present. No shouting allowed. Which suited me perfectly. My daughter-in-law arrived confident again, but it was forced now. Her parents sat beside her, uncomfortable, clutching documents they didn't fully understand. The mediator asked simple questions. Who owns the property? I do, I said, sliding the deed forward. Was permission given for occupancy? No. Were locks changed without authorization? Yes. Each answer landed cleanly. Undeniably. Then came the moment I had prepared for. The mediator asked, do you have evidence of intent? I nodded. And handed over the printed messages. The room changed. Because intent is what turns misunderstanding into action. Planning into violation. Silence filled the space as pages were read. She won't be back for weeks. We can start moving my parents' things in. She hates confrontation. That last line hung heavy. My son shifted in his chair. My daughter-in-law stared at the table. Words, once typed casually, now stripped of innocence. She tried to speak. Tried to reframe. But the mediator stopped her. Please respond only to the questions. Structure removes manipulation. That's why people fear it. The outcome was clear. Her parents were given a formal notice to vacate. The locks were to be restored immediately. Any further interference would escalate legally. Financial restitution for damages and unauthorized modifications was ordered. Not because I demanded it, but because the law recognized loss. They moved out quietly. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just boxes. And suddenly, my house breathed again. The final confrontation happened days later. Not in court. Not through lawyers. But in my living room. My son stood there alone. No wife. No parents. No allies. Just him. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I believed him. And still, belief didn't change consequences. You didn't protect me, I replied. And that matters more than intention. He nodded slowly. Understanding, finally arriving. Late, but genuine. That night, I slept in my own bed again. Walls freshly painted back to their original color. Photographs returned to their places. Locks changed, this time by me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt restored. Because revenge isn't about destruction. It's about correction. And the final correction was still coming. Not for them. For me. Boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. And I had learned, calmly, clearly, how to enforce them. The house was quiet again. Not the hollow quiet it had felt during those first nights at the motel, when silence carried shock and disbelief. This was different. This was earned. I walked room to room slowly, not inspecting for damage, but reclaiming memory. I touched the doorframe where my son's height had once been marked in pencil. I straightened the photograph that always tilted slightly because the nail was old. I opened windows and let the air move freely, as if the house itself needed to breathe after holding its breath for weeks. Peace returned in layers. Not all at once. That's how dignity comes back too. The legal process didn't end the day they moved out. Justice rarely does. It follows through. My lawyer finalized the restitution. The cost of repainting. The locksmith. The inconvenience. The unauthorized use of utilities. None of it was dramatic. None of it was vengeful. It was exact. When the payment arrived, I didn't celebrate. I filed it. Because the point was never to gain. It was to correct the imbalance they had created. My son tried to come by often after that. Always alone. Always hesitant. I didn't turn him away. But I didn't invite him in immediately either. Boundaries, I had learned, are not walls. They are doors you choose when to open. We spoke calmly. About responsibility. About assumptions. About the difference between helping someone and sacrificing another person to do it. He listened more than he spoke. That mattered. His wife never came. She sent messages instead. Long ones. Carefully worded. Apologies wrapped in explanations. Understanding paired with excuses. I read them all. I responded to none. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. Some conversations are already complete. Weeks passed. Then months. The house settled into me again, and I into it. I rearranged furniture. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Choice feels different when it's yours. I planted new flowers in the garden. Not to replace the old ones. To mark a new season. People often think revenge stories end with triumph. With someone humiliated. With someone broken. But real justice is quieter. It looks like uninterrupted sleep. It feels like walking through your front door without anxiety. It sounds like silence that no longer threatens. One afternoon, I sat at the same window where I used to drink my tea every morning. The same chair. The same cup. But I wasn't the same woman. I thought about the version of myself who had handed over the spare key without hesitation. She wasn't foolish. She was generous. But generosity without boundaries is an invitation to be erased. And I would never allow that again. I changed my will. Updated documents. Removed assumptions. Clarity in writing protects what kindness cannot. I informed my son, calmly without accusation, that my home would never again be shared without my explicit, written consent. He nodded. No resistance. Only acceptance. Growth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it just sits quietly and stays. The trap I set was never cruel. It didn't involve deception. It involved patience. I allowed them to reveal themselves fully. To document their intentions. To step forward confidently into accountability. They believed my silence was weakness. It was discipline. And discipline outlasts arrogance every time. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because many people my age are taught to disappear politely. To give way. To shrink. To believe that love means surrender. It does not. Love without respect is control. And respect begins where boundaries are enforced. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, in the quiet endurance, in the hesitation to confront, in the fear of being labeled difficult, understand this. You are not difficult for defending what is yours. You are not selfish for requiring consent. You are not weak for choosing law over chaos, calm over rage, intelligence over noise. I am still kind. I am still patient. But I am no longer invisible. And that is the justice I live with every day. Not revenge that scars others, but boundaries that protect me. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own quiet resilience, share it, like it, and subscribe. Because stories like this aren't about anger. They're about remembering who you are, and refusing to let anyone move you out of your own life.